Hello, welcome to Ray-ality TV. I'm Raymond Bakari, and today I'm joined by the chairman of the Rhode Island Libertarian Party, William Hunt Jr. Mr. Hunt, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me, Ray.
Anytime, and it's a pleasure of mine to have you on the show. Just diving right into it here with the first question. You're currently the party chair for Rhode Island's Libertarian Party. In the sort of two-party system, many people don't really know about third parties or even what they stand for. When I hear libertarian, I sometimes think, oh, like former Congressman of Texas, Ron Paul. But I know there's a better way to explain what a libertarian is for those watching. So my first question is, can you explain for those watching, what does it mean to be a libertarian?
Yeah, certainly. So the Libertarian Party is the third largest political party in the country. We are the best alternative to the duopoly, the two-party system that exists in this country right now. We were started in 1974 officially as a party, and really the condensed version of the Libertarian platform is we basically want to abolish everything related to government. Everything that we can abolish, we want to limit. And whatever's left, we refuse to pay for is basically what it boils down to. And it's libertarians are very focused on property rights and making sure that people aren't taking or forcing anything from one individual to redistribute to another individual.
And, 2022 is starting to gear up and dominate the news cycles nationally and even locally. There are a bunch of offices up for grabs here in the state. All the state legislators are running for re-election. Some of the municipal and a few of the statewide office incumbents are term limited. Are there any specific offices on the party's target list for 2022?
Well, certainly. I mean, obviously, we struggle like the Republican Party struggles in this state as well to field candidates. It's something that if you're going against the establishment that's up there, it's a tough ask to get somebody to dedicate that much time to run for office. Someone who's run for office 4 times myself, I know the time commitment and everything that's involved with that. That's a number one challenge. The biggest value proposition we can offer to our candidates that are looking to run under the Libertarian platform are all the resources and the information that we've gathered as a party over these since 2016, since we've really reorganized and gotten back together, and we're getting ready to offer those to any candidates that's looking to run for office. The primary office that we are seeking a candidate for, though, and it's not really fits into what the strategy of the party is, but it's kind of a ends justify the means type situation, is in order to get actual party status in the state of Rhode Island, the Libertarian Party needs to get 5% of the vote in either a statewide governor's race or a statewide presidential race. The closest we came in recent history was Gary Johnson, Bill Weld campaign. It was about 3.5% in the state of Rhode Island. We got the Joe Jorgensen campaign was very much a disappointment in terms of how many voters we got to turn out in the state of Rhode Island to vote for her. And that's for a number of reasons, which again is more on the national politics. I think the main focus of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island is local politics and local issues. And that's why, ideally, we want to find local candidates at the statewide, state rep, state senate, and town council, school committee level. But again, just by the nature of having to form ourselves as a statewide party, we need to have that governor's candidate as well.
And you had mentioned, the goal is to get the 5% for the gubernatorial candidate. Is there a candidate that's going to run for governor at this point in time as a libertarian?
Not one that we have identified yet. There's a couple names that people have expressed interest. But an interesting thing about the Libertarian Party is that we do our nomination process at our state convention, which is going to be held in April this year. And so we do not have the taxpayers fund our nomination process like the two corporate parties, the Republican and the Democrats, do, where they're having the state fund their primary process in order for them to choose their candidate. So any candidate that's interested in seeking the libertarian endorsement and looking to be that candidate that can, obviously the goal is to win the election, but in the short term, the mean is to get 5%, 1 in 20 voters to actually vote libertarian, so that we can then, similar to how the moderate party was a few years back before they lost their party access, we could then be a party where people can register, they can identify themselves as libertarians. That makes it a whole lot easier for us for identifying voters, fundraising, and organization and volunteer efforts. So that's really kind of what our main priority has to be, just to get that main party or named party access here in the state of Rhode Island.
And when you run a statewide campaign for governor, it's you kind of want to start early, like get your people ready to run this campaign a year out and let people know that you're going to run for the highest office in the state. Do you have a specific time frame for when you would kind of have like the door set, whether the door closed on when a candidate should announce?
Well, again, so the April convention that we have scheduled it's going to be in the early part of April. We're still working out venues and that stuff, and that's been made more difficult, obviously, with all the pandemic issues and the uncertainty of everything going forward. But in that regard, that is when you're going to get the official endorsement by the party, which is what would be ideal candidate to have. I mean, obviously, there is situations where the executive committee can nominate someone or endorse someone, beyond that convention, but ideally we'd have someone nominated and seeking the endorsement from our party members. Because again, this is an opportunity for members of the state of Rhode Island. And if you're not a registered Libertarian with the state or the national party, you can also register with the state party and become a voting delegate at that convention, which would then help us, nominate the person that we're going to run for governor. So, it's really Libertarians are very focused on building the brand here in the state. So it's a double-edged sword. Obviously we want to have a candidate to run for office, but we don't want to have a candidate that's going to damage our brand. And again, the nomination process and the endorsement process outlined in our bylaws that we would have at our April convention will do the majority of the work in nominating who, if we do have a candidate to run for governor.
And aside from governor, you yourself, you had mentioned it in an answer a couple questions ago. You've ran for office a few times, specifically for state representative of District 68, and had impressive numbers. Actually, I believe it was 40% you had got in 2020 versus the Democratic incumbent. Are there any plans to give it another go for that seat in 2022?
Well, I have not committed one way or the other. I just took over as chairman of the state party at our last convention, which was in May of this year. So it's a fairly new position for me. I've been a member of the executive committee before that, but it is a big commitment to be the chairman, just as it is a big commitment to run for office. I've recently had a child as well. So that's a decision that I'm going to have to make as we get a little bit closer to the April convention, because I myself running for the state rep seat, if I would have to seek endorsement through the membership at convention. It's an interesting, I learned a lot, obviously, running for office. I had some unique circumstances. I first ran in 2016 against then incumbent Ken Marshall, and I did very well for my first time out. I had about over 38% of the vote, I think, on that time. I think that signaled to the progressive movement that this was a winnable seat, and they installed Lofton Asensio, who is, if anybody has any recent history about the 2018 election, he's the person who beat me, but failed to take the seat because it ultimately found out he ultimately pled a few months ago about embezzling $16,000+ from the Sierra Fund and funneled it into his campaign, as well as a number of other Board of Election issues. So after that, there was a special election in 2019 where Ken Marshall jumped back in the race. June Speakman, the eventual winner, ran, myself, and a fourth independent candidate also ran in that special election. And I came in second place out of the four-way race, beating out Ken Marshall, the incumbent. And then, as you mentioned, I got over 40% in this last election. So again, this is a testament to the ability of us as, we are running these campaigns not as nearly as well funded as our opponents are. We don't have nearly as many volunteers, nearly as many national groups like the Working Family Party. There's the Rhode Island Political Cooperative that's also promoting candidates right now. We don't have the resources that the Democratic machine in the state has. What we really have is a bunch of dedicated volunteers and people that believe in the cause. And I think anybody that is interested in running for office, I can show you a way to effectively campaign and give it a good run. I was within hundreds of votes of winning the special election and this most recent election, just by the nature of how small the voter turnout is in some of these districts. So there's definitely a path to victory. There's definitely a way to get yourself involved and inserted into the political culture in this state, and get people talking about libertarian principles, get people talking about liberty in a way that they wouldn't have in public debates for running for state office, local office, anything like that. We want people to get those messages out to the voters in their districts.
And while we're still looking at 2022, issues are going to vary from party to party. The Libertarian Party has a number of priorities that you had mentioned at the top of the interview that many voters might not realize that they actually align with, which is something I've heard from libertarians in the past, including the previous chair of the state party. What are the key issues the party plans to focus on in this election cycle?
Well, again, the consensus from the executive committee is that we are a political party. Our main focus is obviously getting candidates to run and ultimately get elected to office. So, we are not necessarily an advocacy group in and of ourselves. Obviously, we want to get libertarian minded and people that fall in line with the platform elected so that they could have positive change once they get into the positions of power. But we have some issues just by the nature of who we are as a party and what, issues that are relevant in our state that we tend to focus on. The big ones are, education obviously is a big issue that has become even more apparent now with the mandates and the lockdowns. We also are big proponents of getting rid of lowering the taxes and the regulations for small businesses. Again, if you look at the shutdown from the pandemic, most of the businesses that were most harmed and most affected were obviously in industries that were directly licensed and regulated by the government, and they were the ones that were being forced to shut down under threat of losing their liquor license, entertainment license, anything like that. So again, these perennial issues that we are dealing with are manifesting in this current crisis. Obviously, cannabis is a big issue for the Libertarian Party. We have been proponents of legalization of cannabis and ultimately all drugs as well. We favor a much more open policy similar to the model they do in Portugal, where they treat people of suffering with addiction as more of a health crisis rather than a criminal offense. And finally, 2A, Second Amendment issues is a very important right for us. And again, I'll bring it back and tie it to the pandemic again. Again, a perennial issue for us as libertarians, now becoming super focused in this pandemic. You see what's going on in Australia, and a country that is being forced to lock down very harshly, a very westernized country that we can relate to very much as Americans. The big difference between them and us right now is, a few years ago, they did a very big effort to take away all of the guns from the citizenry. So now the officials and the government officials have no fear of going ahead and taking away their liberties and their rights because they have an unarmed citizenry and they're not able to defend themselves from a tyrannical government. So again, these are the four issues that we tend to focus on and we tend to align ourselves with. But all issues that are available on, if you go to the Libertarian national page, they'll have their platform, and we subscribe to most of what they're talking about on that platform as well. Obviously, every candidate may not align 100% with every libertarian issue, but again, that's the role of our endorsement process at our convention, where they can vet the candidates and see if there's someone who matches up at least to enough of the libertarian principles that we could throw our endorsement behind them.
And third parties are usually at a disadvantage in the political world, especially in this state. You had mentioned, you touched upon, the resources as well, getting volunteers and, getting the platform out there for the voters who may not know of these third parties. What could be some of the things, looking into this further, what could be some of the things that are holding the state party back in this state, and, how could they be solved to even the playing field?
Sure. So obviously, we are in favor of ways to get people the ability to vote for third-party candidates, whether that be something like a ranked choice voting system. They passed something similar to that in Maine last year, I believe, where you're able to rank the candidates how you like them. There's all sorts of different methods for runoff elections where you're able to go ahead and basically vote for, all right, I really identify with this libertarian candidate, but the conventional wisdom is that if I vote for him, he may be taking a vote away from the other candidate who's my second best choice that maybe has a better chance of winning. And it's very difficult. I mean, you saw that in the recent governor's race between Gina Raimondo, Alan Fung, and the Cool Moose candidate, Bob Healy, who was running as a moderate, where it took a lot for people to go ahead and actually pull that lever for a third party. And it really had them really be sick of the two other candidates. I think that if they had more opportunities to vote for third-party candidates, it would show that we are a viable option and that there is a lot of consensus about the question or the issues that we are bringing up. And a lot of people, as you mentioned, agree with our position on a lot of things. And it's just fighting uphill about that duopoly. The other big thing that's an issue in the state is the campaign finance laws. They have all sorts of arcane requirements about political action committees and different types of organizations and how much they can donate to candidates and all this other stuff. And really it's designed to really hamstring candidates who are running as an independent or as somebody who is not tied to special interests, because each one of those special interests has a political action committee. They have some type of nonprofit organization that's organizing volunteers for them and the like. Not to mention, if you're the Democratic Party, you have the state Democratic Committee, you have the local town and city committees that also have their own fundraising apparatus and resource apparatus. That, as we saw, with Governor Raimondo giving donations to the Providence Democratic Town Committee back when she was governor, that really posed a conflict of interest for a lot of these candidates and, how they're able to manipulate the system. Where on the flip side, if you're an independent candidate or somebody running under a third party label, you're limited to your own campaign financing limits, which is $1,000 per individual. You aren't allowed to accept money from outside organizations outside the state unless they have a brick and mortar bank location here in the state. So that severely limits you getting funding from liberty-minded organizations and think tanks throughout the country that may be willing to donate to you. Whereas, again, they have the political apparatus on their end to have multi-layers. They have a lot more different sources of funding to draw to fund their campaign. Reducing a lot of the campaign finance laws, and that may be antithetical to what a lot of people think about. They want more oversight in campaign finance, but in all reality, you create more regulations. This is just like they do in business, and this is the libertarian philosophy when it comes to business regulation. It really hurts the small startup organization who has to go ahead and comply with all the multi-levels of bureaucracy and regulations that are in place. Whereas the larger established organizations are easily able to comply with those regulations because they have the infrastructure and the resources to do so. So really all you're doing in the situation with creating these campaign finance laws are further entrenching the established candidates in the status quo here in the state. So we need a lot more independent-minded people to come out and not only run for office, but support organizations and causes and donate to campaigns for candidates that you agree with. I don't care what party they're involved in, because if you don't, believe me, there's a lot of other people who have a special interest that are finding ways to take advantage of the system. So yeah, it's definitely something that getting involved is something that you can do to help any political movement to help in the state.
And you had touched upon it in the beginning of the answer when you were talking about ranked choice voting and Bob Healy's run for governor in 2014. Third parties are also in the middle of this time where polarization in politics is at an all-time high, and it both impacting how people are choosing to vote and perceive political parties like the Libertarian and Green parties, where now you see more people looking at third parties as spoilers, especially post the 2000 election. And, that combined with the amount of toxicness that comes with making it to where it's almost impossible for someone to be a true political independent and not be a Republican or a Democrat. This causes a number of misconceptions when someone says they vote third party or aren't of the main two parties in terms of political affiliation. What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about third parties in 2021?
Well, the biggest misconception, I think, that is voting for a third party is a wasted vote. Because, if you're somebody, for example, here in Rhode Island, who is a very strong blue state, for example, voting for President Trump, he didn't win in the state of Rhode Island. You essentially wasted your vote. So if you were one of those people that, wasn't really a true Trump supporter, somebody that didn't support him as a presidential candidate, but you couldn't stomach the idea of voting for a Joe Biden candidate, if somebody just realized that voting for that third party candidate, and like I said, I was not a big fan of the Libertarian presidential candidate in this last election in 2020, but just by the nature of understanding the political mechanisms in the state, throwing your vote towards that third party candidate, that libertarian candidate, could have gotten us over that 5% mark and gotten us this political status. And then you're not only helping out us voting for that particular candidate, who is somebody who you more align with and is not the lesser of the two duopolies, the Republicrats, or whatever the hell you want to call the essentially is the same party system with different colors on, basically. But you could support that third party candidate, help us out as a third party, help us build and actually have direct impact on your local government by having people the ability to register as libertarians and people to run as an official libertarian in their district, not as an unaffiliated running as a libertarian in the state of Rhode Island. And again, that's a nuanced difference, but it is a difference that makes a lot of difference when it comes to organizing and building a party.
And my final question is one that I ask everyone here on the show to keep tradition, and that is, in your opinion, what do you think Rhode Island is best known for?
Oh, geez. I think we're best known for our oceans. And somebody who grew up, I grew up in Newport County in Portsmouth, and I grew up on the water growing up, and the seafood was a big part of my life. After I went to college, I worked my way through college working for Newport Lobster Company, which is a wholesale seafood delivery company. So I'm very the fishermen and that whole economy is a very important economy here in the state of Rhode Island. I think it's reflected in our tourism and our one of the major industries in the state. And I can tell you they're an industry that's significantly hurting as a result of, again, and not to tie everything back to the shutdown, it's, they're one that's significantly hurting because of these mandates and because of this prolonged state of emergency that's keeping people afraid to go and keeping people out of work. All the they've completely messed up the entire market of the labor force by introducing all of these subsidies during the shutdown for these people that were collecting and getting paid more not to work in order to work. And that's really hurting us as an economy. That's really hurting us as a state. And it's sad because, again, you think of Rhode Island, you think of the ocean state, you think of our tourism, our seafood, our great restaurants, and we're losing that right now. So I think it's time to end the state of emergency and to open things back up so that we can continue to be known for our great seafood and our restaurants.
Mr. Hunt, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure of mine to have you on.
All right. Thank you so much for any time. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
And thank you for watching this episode of Ray-ality TV. If you want to see future episodes as soon as they're posted on this channel, please click the subscribe button down below, along with the post notification bell icon to the right of it. Or if you're reading the political profile version of this interview, the link's embedded where the link will be embedded within the article. You can always check out the other political profiles on that section, on that subsection within the news section on anchorweb.org. I'm Raymond Bakari. I'll see you on the next episode.